hallway reeked of iron, a long dark smear dragging off into the shadows, showing exactly how far someone had been pulled through this place. The Sword Supreme's direct disciple stared down at the prisoner, her golden eyes empty as she demanded to know where the thing she was after had been hidden. Gu Yanshin bared a brutal grin, refusing to give her what she wanted. So the Sword Supreme's disciple lowered her blade until the tip hovered over his chest, warning him that she would not ask again. The stone floor was soaked and dark, proof that many answers had already been forced out in this room. Gu Yanshin sagged against the filthy wall and let out a slow breath, as if even staying alive through that round of questions counted as a small victory. She was not just any swordswoman. She was the Sword Supreme's own bloodline disciple, raised at the side of the living legend whose blade once shook all of Miram. On the battlefield, the Sword Supreme's disciple carved blazing arcs through the air, her sword light ripping through enemy ranks so fast that whole lines collapsed before they even realized she had moved. She spun once more and brought her blade down, sending a single sweeping strike that crashed into the earth like a falling star and wiped out the last of her enemies in a blinding blast. Blades of light rained down around the Sword Supreme's disciple, each one strong enough to erase a demonic human on its own. With power like this, taking down hundreds in a single swing was not an exaggeration but a simple fact. Her sword light crashed down and tore the ground apart, sending dust and sparks blasting outward in every direction. The disciple spun through the chaos, her blade carving bright arcs as more bodies fell around her. She tightened her grip on the golden hilt, not slowing for even a breath. With one last sweeping cut, the Sword Supreme's disciple sent a wall of light roaring forward, wiping out the remaining demonic humans in a single breath. Back in the cell, the Sword Supreme's disciple seized Gu Yanshin by the collar and hauled him up, certain he still held answers she needed. She smashed him against the cold stone and shouted for him to tell her where the remaining demonic humans had disappeared to. Her golden eyes burned as she leaned in close, telling him that if he felt even the slightest bit of guilt for what he had done, he should talk now. Gu Yanshin coughed and forced his eyes open, fully aware of where the demonic humans had gone yet trapped in a body that could no longer form the words, his throat destroyed beyond use. The cursed heart inside Gu Yanshin pounded wildly, the dark runes crawling over it like chains ready to tear it apart. Gu Yanshin clawed at his chest, knowing the bind on his heart would rip him apart the moment he tried to answer. The Sword Supreme's disciple bit back her tears and forced out a final warning, making it clear this was his last chance. In that dark cell, she held him up and swore that even if the whole world wanted him gone, she would fight to save him as long as he helped her. As she begged him again, Gu Yanshin coughed up blood and wondered if her madness came from hatred toward the demonic humans she had failed to catch. Then he remembered the real reason for her fear. Meteor Blade Jiang Xianyon, her fiancé who had been dragged away by demonic humans. Gu Yanshin found it almost laughable that the woman said to be stronger than anyone in the world was this shaken over a single man, yet that very weakness burned in her eyes. Before he could do anything with that thought, Gu Yanshin's battered body collapsed, the curse and his wounds dragging him down. The Sword Supreme's disciple had torn through the demonic humans like this, each swing strong enough to crush a monster into the floor. Lying there, Gu Yanshin suddenly thought back to the day he first met Wei Xiao Ah in the middle of a crowded market. He wondered when she believed their story had really started, and guessed her answer would not match the one burned into his own memory. Seeing her bright smile in that memory, Yanshin could only gape, wondering how a meeting that started with shared snacks and awkward grins had twisted into the nightmare they were living now. He remembered the days when he rode with the demonic humans, cutting down allies without a second thought, a true traitor who had turned his back on everyone. To him, the curse tearing through his body now felt like nothing more than payback finally reaching him. Back in the cell, the Sword Supreme's disciple wiped at her wet eyes, trying and failing to steady herself as she listened to his ragged breaths. A sudden jolt of fear ran through her, and she spun around toward Yanshin, feeling that something inside him had just crossed a line. Gu Yanshin forced his torn body to crawl, fingers scraping the stone and leaving a thin trail of blood, even as she called out in shock and demanded to know what he was trying to do. Inside his chest, the cursed heart swelled and split with bright cracks, the binding on it breaking apart as if it were about to explode. A column of dark blood and shadow burst out of Gu Yanshin's chest, making the girl freeze in horror as the thing inside him finally broke loose. As the pain swallowed him, Yanshin understood that this was the curse tearing him apart, yet he still dragged his finger through the spreading blood, refusing to stop. His hand shook, but he kept tracing words in blood across the cold stone, clinging to this one last way to speak before the curse finished its work. In his mind, the heavenly demon's smile surfaced, along with her calm warning that if he ever broke the rules tied to that art, the curse on his heart would burst and he would not survive. He remembered how that twisted art wrapped around his heart, binding it with power that would only stay quiet as long as he never turned against the demonic cult. Back in the cell, the girl clutched at his chest in panic, asking why he was suddenly bleeding so much, while Yanshin, barely able to hear her anymore, wondered if saying he had been forced into betrayal would change anything in her eyes. He pictured telling her he had been framed, asking if she would ever believe that, yet even as she shouted at him to stop, his hand kept dragging through the blood, because he already knew her answer would be no. Looking at the tears gathering in her eyes, Yanshin knew that any excuse he gave now would be useless, and he accepted that it was far too late to ask for forgiveness. Gu Yanshin's finger slows as he drags out the last strokes in blood, knowing this is all he can leave behind before his body gives out. The curse wrapped around his heart goes wild, pounding in his chest before bursting out, tearing through him as he staggers in the dark. Lying there with his chest torn apart, Yanshin stares into the dark and wonders why he ever lived a life that led to this end. In his fading mind, A memory rises of a woman in red sitting with his younger self in a broken hall, her hand trembling as she reaches out and cups his face like he still deserves kindness. His sister's face fills the memory, smiling through blood as she tells him that all she ever wanted was for her brother to live a happy life. Back in the cold cell, the blonde girl clutches Gu Yanshin's brutal body and calls his name again and again, while in his head every regret, from petty cruelty to unforgivable sins, crashes down on him at once. His purple eyes barely stay open as he understands that every selfish choice and every moment of guilt stacked together to shape the life now slipping away. Far away from the dungeon, an unknown figure steps through wet grass, their quiet approach marking the start of something beyond Yanshin's fading breath. The green-haired woman looks at Gu Yanshin and realizes who he is, spilling out an apology as tears and blood run down her face. She keeps talking like she is the one who did something unforgivable, begging for a chance he cannot give. Yanshin only watches her with dull purple eyes, too empty to answer her pain. The woman's eyes widen as she hears him blame himself right up to the end, shouting Gu Yanshin's name until her throat must hurt. Her tears spill down with the rain, sliding over his brutal lips and motionless face like she is trying to wake him with nothing but grief. Flat on the wet stone, Yanshin drags up a trembling hand and forces out a few broken words, saying that even this life turned out wrong. The woman's eyes widen as she hears him blame himself right up to the end. Yanshin stares at the drops on his fingers and brushes them off with a bitter smile, claiming it is only rain on his face. The white-haired woman studies him through her own tears and softly agrees, pretending to believe he feels nothing. She weakly asks if the moon has risen, and Yanshin lifts his head to check the dark sky before telling her it hangs above them. Hearing that, the woman smiles through the pain, saying that with the moon and him both here, it is enough for her. Her blood-stained hand reaches toward the sky for a moment, then the strength leaves her fingers and it drops, letting the rain wash over skin that no longer answers. The white-haired woman lies on the soaked ground with a dark stain spreading across her chest, her eyes closed as if only sleeping. Yanshin clings to her in the downpour, but the rain is the only thing still moving between them. In the end, the demonic cult was crushed in the Great Orthodox Demon War, and Gu Yanshin was dragged away as a prisoner. Locked in a stone cell, he was broken and tormented until his ruined body finally gave out, closing the life he had thrown to the demonic side. Gu Yanshin's battered eyes eased open, the purple light in them still alive. For breath he just stared into the empty white, unsure if this was death or something worse. Out of that blank silence, a bright childish voice popped into his head, calling out about a potato like it was the most important thing in the world. Wai Xiao Ah beamed up at him, clutching a steaming potato in both hands and eagerly asking if he wanted some, like sharing it with him would make it taste even better. Gu Yanshin stared at the potato in front of his nose, sweat running down his cheek as the noise of the market rushed in. For someone who had just died in chains, standing here while a smiling girl tried to feed him felt unreal. Right there in the middle of the busy street, Yanshin burst out in confusion, making a few heads turn his way. Wai Xiao Ah just kept holding up the potato, as if this tiny snack could anchor him to this new, peaceful start. Gu Yanshin stared at his own hands, panic rising as the noise of the street pressed in. None of this matched the cold cell where he was sure his life had ended. His mind snapped back to that last day, when the heavenly demon's curse flared and something inside his chest burst apart. In that instant, he had been sure there was no way back. He remembered sliding down that cold wall, his body ruined, while Wai Xiao Ah clung to him and begged him to hold on. In his mind, that was where everything ended. Yet under his palm, his heart thumped strong and steady, like nothing had ever touched it. That alone made the memory feel like some twisted lie. The boy stared at his small, unscarred fingers and the bright sky above the roofs. This was not the body that had rotted in chains. This was his younger self, untouched by. If this was not a dream, then something had dragged him back on purpose, and that thought sat in his chest heavier than any curse. Across from him stood Wai Xiao Ah, clutching a tray of food and tilting her head just like back then. Yanshin slowly understood that this was the very day their paths had first crossed. She held the half-eaten potato out to him again, just as she had in his faded memory. Yanshin tried to remember what kind of foolish answer he had given her the first time. Yanshin smacked her hand aside and the steaming potato tumbled through the air. Wai Xiao Ah flinched, eyes wide, watching the treat she had shared slip from her grasp. His foot crashed down in front of her, making her stumble as the rest of the potatoes spilled from her arms. Yanshin glared down at her with burning red eyes, snapping that someone like her had no right to push in and that she needed to remember her place. The young master pressed a hand to his head, grimacing as the memory dug in. Then a crooked smile tugged at his lips as he decided this had to be a dream, and he admitted to himself that he must still have a mountain of regrets left to see this again. This time, Yanshin calmly reached out and took one of the potatoes, even while muttering that he was not a fan of them. Wai Xiao Ah's cheeks turned pink as she watched him accept the food she had brought. The little servant told him to enjoy it, clutching the basket like it was treasure. Yanshin answered with a quiet thanks and a faint, honest smile that did not match the cruel boy he used to be. He chomped down without thinking and jerked back at once, shocked that something in a dream could feel so hot on his tongue. Wai Xiao Ah burst into laughter, hugging her basket as she pointed out how red his face had gotten. Clan servant sprinted over, calling out to the young master in alarm. Yanshin, tongue still burning and head spinning from the clash of past and present, could only stare back, wondering how real this dream actually was. Yanshin's guard hurried up the street, panting that the young master had vanished and he had finally found him here. The bodyguard Muyon stammered that he had been scared something might have gone wrong. Down below, Yanshin just laughed with Xiao Ah over the burning hot potato, like nothing serious had happened at all. Muyon burst out in anger, but Yanshin waved him off and told him to relax, already acting like the one in charge again. As they walked, Yanshin calmly told his guard to hand over the honey cookie he was sure Muyon had tucked away, leaving the poor man sweating beside him. Muyon pulled out the honey cookie and cracked it open, the glossy crust splitting to show the sweet treat inside. Yanshin held the honey cookie out to Xiao Ah and asked if she wanted it, leaving her stammering in disbelief, while Muyon gaped that the young master was giving it to someone else. Yanshin scratched his head with a crooked smile, admitting that after getting such a tasty potato from her, this little cookie was the only thing he could give back. Xiao Ah cradled the honey cookie with shining eyes, whispering that it was her first time getting something that looked so bright and smelled so sweet, before excitedly calling out to Wai Ah to show it off. Xiao Ah hugged her basket of potatoes like treasure, still glowing over the cookie, while Yanshin and his guard watched from behind, not knowing this piece was about to be broken. Farther up the street, Xiao Ah's grandfather shoved past strangers and ran full speed, fear written all over his face as he called out for her. He grabbed Xiao Ah into a tight hug the moment he reached her, shaking with relief as she squealed and clung to him, still somehow keeping hold of the potatoes. The old man scolded her for letting go of his hand, voice still shaking. But Xiao Ah just beamed and showed off that she had managed to bring back every last potato, as if that fixed everything. He looked her over from head to toe, asking if she was hurt and quietly pressing if she had done anything she should not have, and her hesitant reply made his stomach drop. Yanshin stiffened as Xiao Ah cheerfully pointed his way, proudly telling her grandfather that she had even shared one of her precious potatoes with that young master over there. The old man's eye narrowed, the warmth from before fading as he fixed his gaze on the boy she had pointed at. Without another word, Xiao Ah's grandfather grabbed her by the wrist and hurried off, dragging her through the street while she stumbled after him, still trying to ask where they were going. Xiao Ah's grandfather bent so low his back almost snapped, blaming himself for her mistake and begging the young master's pardon, while she shrank behind him clutching the potatoes. Yanshin just smiled with the cookie still in his hand and told the elder there was nothing to forgive. The young master explained that he had just gotten hungry, and that Xiao Ah had kindly shared a potato with him which he enjoyed. Yanshin joined his hands in a respectful greeting, the honey cookie caught between their palms as he said it was the only way he could repay her kindness. Standing straight under the bright umbrellas, the young master asked the elder to accept the honey cookie as thanks, treating the tiny snack like a serious gift. He held the cookie out with both hands, leaving it up to them whether to accept his thanks or turn it away. The old man's eyes wavered as he insisted they could not accept something so precious, but Xiao Ah's gaze locked on the cookie, her whole face lighting up as she blurted out how sweet and shiny it looked and shot her hand toward it. Snatching her back, the grandfather refused again and bolted down the street with Xiao Ah tucked under his arm, shouting that they would not trouble the young master any longer, while Yanshin just stared after the dust trail they left behind. The elder twisted back mid-stride, telling Yanshin that if he still held any anger he should take it out on him instead. Yanshin rushed up, lightly taking Xiao Ah's hand and placing the cookie with her, saying this was his answer before turning away, leaving the old man stunned. Yanshin laughed and stopped Xiao Ah from shoving more potatoes into his arms, telling her she had already given him more than enough. The grandfather's lips shook as he whispered that Wai Ah had finally found the boy they had been looking for. At the gate, the old man bowed low in thanks while Xiao Ah bounced beside him, waving both hands at Yanshin with a grin. Inside the hall, Yanshin watched them go with a small, smug smile, while Muyon stood beside him like a steady wall. Muyon leaned in, worried, asking if the young master's body was acting up again and muttering about how strange that elder had been. In Yanshin's mind, the humble elder turned into the man who once sat on the Murim Alliance throne, the leader everyone in the martial world had to bow to. Yanshin remembered that this was not just any elder but one of the three supremes, a swordmaster so strong that even the darkest factions whispered his name in fear. The image settled on Wai Hyo Gun himself, the sword supreme, standing beneath a rain of blades, and Yanshin finally matched the timid broom carrying grandfather to the man once called the strongest in Murim. Yanshin stared at the old man's back, still trying to accept that the sword supreme was quietly living here like some random elder. Even if this really was just a dream, he could not shake the memory of how close that power had come to ending him. Wai Xiao Ah waved with both warmth and shyness, clutching the basket like it was treasure, and that simple smile pushed aside the fear in Yanshin's chest for a moment. The young master let a smug little grin slip out, pretending he was just pleased with himself when, deep down, he was simply happy that she liked him this much. Muyon urged the young master to return, and Yanshin let himself be led through the crowd, leaving the old man and the potato girl behind as if closing the cover on a strange dream. As they walked, the noise of the market blurred and Yanshin's thoughts drifted somewhere softer, like petals floating past his eyes. In that endless field of light and flowers, he felt the weight on his chest ease and admitted to himself that he had already done all he could in the life he left behind. So it was finally time to open his eyes and live this one properly. Cool, clear water seemed to wash through his mind, sweeping away the last clinging bits of regret and fear. Light flooded in like a clear sky after a storm, and Yanshin rose from the dream, ready to face the world that was waiting for him. Muyon stopped in front of the gate and told the young master they had arrived, and Yanshin's face twisted as that old, heavy feeling in his chest came rushing back. As he walked in, Yanshin rubbed his chin and wondered why this strange second life was still going on when, if it were just a dream, he should have woken up long ago. His thoughts slipped back to that throne of shadows, and he wondered if this life he was walking through again was tied to the heavenly demon's curse that should have finished him. A calm voice reached him from outside the doorway, and Yanshin's eyes narrowed, finding that tone oddly fascinating even before he turned to see who it was. The woman lightly mocked him, saying she had expected him to run rather than show his face here. Striding through the gathered crowd with sharp eyes, the flame sword Gu Yonseo pointed out that this was not somewhere a coward should wander, since the clan head himself was on his way here. Watching that familiar smirk, Yanshin remembered that Gu Yonseo was his second oldest sister, and in his past life, the one who had despised him more than anyone else in the clan. Yanshin understood that the crowd had formed because the clan head was coming here, and a cold doubt crept in as he wondered what trick his hateful sister was planning this time. Yonseo grabbed Yanshin's shoulder with a lazy smile, telling him that if he was planning anything stupid, he should drop it here and just get lost. She said she was only here because she had no choice, then jabbed at Yanshin for knowing that and still never showing his face until today. Yanshin admitted it was his fault and said he would take it up with the clan head himself later. Muyon stared in surprise as the girl beside him frowned, both taken aback that the young master was actually talking about apologizing. Yonseo's patience shattered, and she roared Yanshin's name loud enough to shake the courtyard. Flames burst from under Yonseo's feet as she shot forward, her anger turning the courtyard into a blazing furnace. She walked through the cracking tiles and swirling fire, saying she had no idea what scheme he was cooking up this time but that he should drop it now, because she was about to get seriously angry. On the scorched tiles, Yanshin raised a hand and told her to wait, and Yonseo, still burning with heat, suddenly remembered that their father, the clan head himself, was almost. A red horse burst into the courtyard and reared up, hooves grinding the tiles into dust as its rider yanked it to a stop. The clan head sat tall in the saddle, red eyes sweeping over the scorched courtyard, as he calmly asked what all this noise was about. The clan head looked down from his horse, eyes calm but heavy, weighing everything in front of him without a word. Yanshin knelt on the cracked tiles, hands clenched together, sweat running down his face as he waited for his father's verdict. The patriarch's face did not change at all, and that lack of anger or warmth made his silence even harder to bear. Without looking at his son again, the clan head turned his gaze aside, already moving on to deal with the rest of the courtyard. The patriarch stepped down beside his horse and ordered the minister to report, and the bowed man hurried to explain which sword units were resting and which ones stood ready for duty. In Yanshin's mind, his father's shadow loomed over him just like before, and he could not tell if this was a new life or the same nightmare, only that the man's stare still weighed on his back. The clan head turned toward the great hall, his robe brushing the stone, and told his third child to come to the patriarch's room alone once the meal was finished. Yanshin stared after his father, eyes wide, while Yonseo and the other youth traded uneasy looks, all of them sweating as they tried to guess what that private summons would mean. Before they even sat down, Yanshin's stomach was a mess, so he quietly begged the other youths for something to help him digest while they traded uneasy smiles. Bowl's meal, a feast that looked flawless no matter how heavy the air felt around it. Yanshin poked at his food with dead eyes, thinking that the atmosphere was so suffocating he could not even tell what he was shoving into his mouth. He wished someone would just cut through this choking silence, anything to make the meal feel normal, and right then the patriarch calmly called out to his second child. The second daughter straightened with a bright smile, and proudly reported that a small insight had pushed her up to 3-star just a few days ago. The clan head nodded, saying her growth was ahead of her years and telling her to keep devoting herself, and she bowed deeply, grateful for the rare words of praise. An elder remarked that reaching 3-star so young was truly impressive and urged the second daughter to sit and keep eating, and Yanshin watched her with mixed feelings, knowing that someone born with that kind of talent was still grinding harder than anyone else. Yanshin watched his second sister lean over the dishes, and for a moment was struck by how much softer she looked when she smiled like that. Then her eyes hardened, and the warmth vanished, leaving a glare so sharp that Yanshin instantly regretted ever thinking she looked gentle at all. The call for the third child made Yanshin jolt, his chopsticks freezing midair as every worry he had about this meal rushed back at once. The clan head's shadow fell over the table, and Yanshin sat stiffly under that heavy gaze, feeling smaller than ever in front of the man who ruled the clan. The patriarch pushed his chair back and rose, a simple movement that told everyone the meal and whatever judgment came with it were over for now. Yanshin tried to steady his nerves with another bite, thinking his father would call him the moment the dishes cleared, when a servant bent close and addressed him in a low voice. She quietly explained that the clan head wanted him to rest for the day and come to the clan head room tomorrow instead, leaving Yanshin blinking in confusion at the sudden change. Later that night, Yanshin rested his chin on the window frame, staring over the dark rooftops while his thoughts circled around why his father had put off their talk. Yanshin stayed by the window, cheek in his hand, waiting to wake up and never doing so. That was when it hit him that this was real, that he had actually gone back. He wondered if this was the kind of regression he had only ever heard about. His fingers loosened, body sinking into the bedding as the weight of it settled in. For the first time since waking up here, he let himself believe that the past might really be behind him. He almost laughed at himself for even thinking he could take down the heavenly demon first. In his mind, he saw her standing over a burning world, the same monster who had wiped out the 3 supremes that everyone called beings above the heavens. Remembering that power, his old life as a demonic lackey felt even smaller and more pathetic. He remembered the days he strode through burning cities as a demonic monster, serving under the heavenly demon simply because he wanted to live. That memory twisted into the image of himself broken and alone, and from there he could finally see just how many regrets he was carrying. All that regret felt like a heavy lump in his hands, ugly and impossible to ignore. Still, he knew that carrying it had opened his eyes to things he had never understood while he was drunk on power. As that weight seemed to melt through his fingers, Yanshin clung to a single thought. If this really was a new start, he would not walk the same road again. This time, he wanted a different life. Back in his quiet room, he admitted that the heavenly demon would fall to YCLR again and the cult would vanish with her. Until that day came, he decided to stay out of the center of the storm and just live as calmly as he could while helping where he was able. But even as he told himself he would live quietly, a fierce heat rose in his chest. This was a one-time chance and he refused to waste it. Yanshin swore to himself that he would not repeat a single regret from his past life. Yanshin lowered his head, ready to stop dreaming and actually check what kind of power this new start had left him with. His awareness ran through his body like lightning, tracing every thin line of energy until it gathered around the small burning core in his center. Under the calm night sky, he finished his search, and had to admit that this tiny spark of internal energy was all he had. The image of his sister rose in his mind, a year older yet already a blazing 3-star, and his own tiny spark felt even more pathetic beside her flames. Yanshin shut his eyes for a moment, then pushed the envy aside, reminding himself that a small flame could still grow if he handled it right. He gathered that weak energy into his hands and started guiding it with the Gu Flame Wheel art, the Gu clan's own secret fire that he planned to slowly raise like a blooming flower. In his mind, he saw future stages of the art, where a 4-star could let flames burst from his body, and a 7-star would let that fire coat him completely like the blazing figures of his sister and father. But when he thought about it honestly, he was still just a 1-star standing in his sister's shadow, with a long climb ahead before those flames could ever reach that level. Yanshin clenched his teeth and decided he had to pull in as much internal energy as he could and refine it until he reached 2-star, no matter how hard it was. He drew that tiny flame out of his core and trapped it between his hands, spinning it with the Gu Flame Wheel art to grind it stronger. The weak spark suddenly roared, flames swirling out of his hands and chest as he forced his body to handle more power than it was ready for. Pain shot through his body, but he just ground his teeth and held on, refusing to let the fire slip away. The small room shook with heat as sparks spun around him, the Gu clan's flame turning his late-night practice into a blazing furnace. He finally collapsed onto the mat, chest heaving, and admitted to himself that if he pushed any harder right now, he might not make it through the night. Gasping for air, the young master admitted that with his current body, even using this much internal energy was risky, and if he kept forcing it, his energy could twist and ruin him. Even so, a crooked grin crept over his lips, showing he still planned to push forward, just careful enough not to break himself. Gu Yanshin watched the blazing wheel of fire spin between his hands and finally let himself grin, knowing he had pushed his body into the 2-star realm, even if it was only the early stage. Morning light poured over the Gu clan grounds, as Yanshin promised himself that this time he would stay clear of the stupid choices that once dragged his future into ruin. A tiny bird chirped on a branch under the clear sky, the simple peace of the morning matching the quiet goals forming in Yanshin's mind. Yanshin stared ahead with a drained face, body aching and mind heavy, as he understood that reaching this small step had already pushed him close to his limit. Pulling his robe tight, the young master admitted that wasting his early years was on him, and that the road in front of him now stretched far beyond a single lucky breakthrough. He reached for the handle, thinking that he would head to the clan head's room later. But until that meeting, he needed to make every spare moment count. With a lighter step than the night before, Yanshin headed out of his room, deciding that instead of lazing around he would spend the free hours sharpening his skills. Just as he stepped out ready to train, YCLA looked up from the floor with shining eyes and reached toward him, her bright smile pulling his thoughts away from drills and back to the girl whose future he was trying to change. While someone casually called out in the distance, the night sky itself started to split open, a bright purple crack forcing its way into the darkness. The clan servant paused and stared up, confused that this bright thing in the sky was no star he remembered, as the glowing crack kept spreading wider above him. Fear washed over the man as the light twisted, and before he could make sense of it, something slammed down with brutal force, marking the day everything changed. From that tier, twisted monsters flooded into the world, ripping through the air and turning peaceful land into a burning field of screams and chaos. The crack hardened into a jagged, glowing doorway, a wound in the sky that people would soon call the gate of the demon realm. To stand against the monsters pouring from those gates, each sect raised hardened fighters like this one-eyed veteran and his comrades, special sword units built for nothing but hunting those things down. The Gu clan fielded 5 of these sword units, and at their head stood Gu Hwi by the eldest sister, who led the 5th unit into the mist and dragged the clan's troublemaker little brother through hellish training whenever she had the chance. Gu Yanshin remembered being dragged along like baggage behind that unit, knowing now that this rough place under his sister's command was where a huge part of his life truly started. Yanshin thought this meeting with YCLA should have been months away, yet here she was already, standing in his life far earlier than he remembered. YCLA beamed up at him from the floor, reaching out like they were already friends and cheerfully pointing out that they were meeting again. Out in the corridor, Yanshin paused in the doorway while the little servant girl crawled closer, stretching her hand toward him as if trying to pull him into her world. He blamed his late-night training and heavy body, acting like he was too tired to bother and turning his back on her bright smile. As Yanshin tried to slip inside, Xiao suddenly called out for him to stop, pushing herself forward with more courage than grace. Her small hand caught the back of his robe and held on tight, refusing to let him walk out of her reach. Still on her knees, the new servant held onto his clothes and cheeks warm began to introduce herself, saying it was nice to meet him, and that from today she would be by his side. His hand moved toward hers, not to shake her off but to meet it, a quiet sign that this time he would not run from the girl reaching out to him. Yanshin stared at the old man, mouth half open, trying to make sure he had heard that right. The old man made the girl bow and apologize, and Yanshin just stood there, wondering how things had flipped around on him. When even the old man bent at the waist before him, Yanshin's confusion turned into a wary curiosity about what they wanted. The elder introduced himself as Waimun and said he had come to serve, promising to give everything he had even if he was just a worn-out old man. Hearing the name Waimun, Yanshin froze, thinking of the Sword Supreme he knew and wondering why the old monster was calling himself something else. Xiao followed her grandfather's lead, softly giving her own name and saying she would be helping him from now on, cheeks burning as she greeted Yanshin. Only then did it hit him that this loyal service was meant for him, and his mind spun at the thought of being served by the Sword Supreme and his granddaughter. Yanshin let out a long breath, knowing that if his father, the clan head, had arranged this, then no matter how awkward it felt, he had no choice but to accept them. The old servant moved the broom back and forth across the floor, sweeping like this really was his job now, and not something far beneath a living legend. Yanshin slumped on the floor and eyed the broom, realizing it was just a plain stick and straw, which only made it harder to accept that the Sword Supreme was the one using it. Side Waimun rested the broom on his shoulder and looked over the bright courtyard, carrying himself like any other old cleaner instead of the man who once shook the whole martial world. The old man's lips curled into a gentle smile, as if sweeping courtyards for bratty young master was nothing more than a small joke in a very long life. Yanshin forced a crooked smile and raised his hand, asking if this was really how things were supposed to be, because having the Sword Supreme as his cleaner felt like some twisted joke. More than the weirdness of it all, Yanshin began to worry about what this meant for his plans, because having these two by his side would change everything he did from now on. Meanwhile, Xiao walked through the grounds with a wobbling stack of folded clothes in her arms, already working as his servant, and unknowingly adding one more weight to the future he was trying to change. Xiao wobbled forward with a mountain of clothes stacked higher than her head, hugging the heavy jar like it might crush her at any second, while the older maids walked beside her, half amused and half worried. The maids tried to take some of the load, but Xiao just grinned weakly and hugged the jar tighter, more worried about proving herself than about how close she was to dropping everything. Her foot caught on a loose stone, and Xiao's eyes went round as the heavy jar lurched forward and the pile of clothes burst into the air. She crashed onto the stone floor with a dull thud, the jar rolling away and the neatly folded clothes exploding into a messy heap around her. In the middle of the courtyard, Xiao lay spread out with laundry everywhere, while the other maids froze mid-step and both Yanshin and Waimun looked over, unsure whether to laugh or rush in. The jar plopped down over Xiao's head like a helmet, and the maids, Yanshin, and even the old Sword Supreme could only stare with cold sweat on their faces at how badly this simple chore had gone. Yanshin let out a tiny sniffle as he watched her lie there sniffling under the jar, wondering how someone could be this hopeless at simple chores. The maids fussed over Xiao, brushing dust from her clothes and patting her head as she sulked, and Yanshin could only wonder how someone who should hold terrifying martial talent inside her could be this clumsy in daily life. Yanshin rubbed his aching head on the steps, still annoyed from that whole mess, while Xiao, bucket and all, hurried up behind him like she had already forgotten her own crash. One of the younger maids blinked as Xiao suddenly marched past and asked where she was running off to in such a hurry. Xiao stopped right in front of the porch, clutching the folded clothes and peering up at Yanshin with wide, nervous eyes, like she was bracing for some kind of test. Inside, Yanshin stared at the girl with a bucket on her head and asked why she kept trailing after him, and Xiao, flustered, explained that she had been told to stick to him wherever he went. Out in the yard, Xiao shouted that her grandpa was the one who told her to serve him, and Yanshin followed her gaze to the old sweeper, suddenly realizing this was not some random maid's idea. The other maids cheered Xiao on, saying she was the only one brave enough to handle the young master, and Yanshin could not shake the feeling that they had simply shoved the troublesome job onto the most clueless girl they had. Watching Xiao scramble toward him with one shoe half off, Yanshin grumbled inwardly that he was still the son of a great clan, and wondered if it was really okay for his personal servant to be picked in such a lazy way. When Xiao gently grabbed his robe and smiled up at him, Yanshin had to admit that having her by his side was fine, but the thought of the Sword Supreme standing behind his new servant made the whole thing feel way too heavy. Xiao threw up both hands with a huge grin, proudly saying she had finished everything he told her to do. Yanshin's hands curled into tight fists, his body stiff as that bright smile clashed with the heavy truth he knew about her. As he walked off with Xiao hurrying after him, Yanshin wondered if his father even knew who these two really were, or if he had just stopped caring after so many servants ran away. While tightening his loose shoes, Yanshin reminded himself that his father had called him over today, so he decided he would just ask directly when he got there. Crossing the wide yard with Xiao trotting behind, Yanshin could only wonder what in the world was happening anymore. Xiao sprinted after him, panting hard as she shouted for the young master to wait. Yanshin glanced back at her and told the new servant to stay put and get used to her work here before trying to run after him everywhere. Xiao lowered her head, cheeks burning and eyes shining, and quietly agreed to stay and do her best. The old servant rested both hands on his broom and watched the two kids, his eyes calm but sharp, as if he already knew this job would not be easy for the new girl. Across the open yard, Yanshin told Xiao to stop chasing after him and just learn her work properly, while she stared at the ground and clutched her hands, taking his words to heart. Yanshin slid the heavy gate open and stepped through without waiting for a reply, acting like the whole matter with the new servant was already over. Behind him, Xiao Ah stayed frozen by the steps, fingers twisting in her sleeves, afraid that if he walked out like this she might have already messed up her first day. Just before the doors shut, Yanshin paused and called back to her, unable to leave her standing there with that lost look on her face. Through the thin gap, Yanshin told her that if she tried her best, he would bring her something tasty later, tossing out the promise like it was nothing even though he meant it. The gate shut with a dull thud, leaving only his offhand promise echoing in the quiet yard. Xiao Ah's eyes shone like stars as she pumped her fists, already fired up to work harder than anyone else now that the young master had promised her something to eat. The old servant watched Yanshin walk off, his grip resting on the broom, eyes calm but sharp, like he was weighing the boy's promise against the burden that girl carried. Yanshin stared up at the clear sky and shivered inside, thinking that facing his father like this was way too scary. On the way to his father's quarters, Yanshin paced himself with nervous thoughts, wondering how to even talk to a man he barely spoke to in his last life. He guessed the clan head had called him here for a reason, so he decided to listen first, then bring up why Xiao Ah and her grandfather had been placed in his room. The clan head was already waiting by the door with a wooden box when Yanshin arrived, and his sudden call made the boy jolt back in panic before he hurriedly stepped inside. Sitting across from the clan head, Yanshin replayed his outburst and wanted to sink under the table, scolding himself for blurting out something so crude in front of the most feared man in the clan. The clan head calmly asked if he had met the new servants, and Yanshin answered that he had greeted them earlier that morning. Guqiao Woon pressed further, wanting to know what he thought of them, and Yanshin forced a relaxed smile as he prepared his answer. With a tray of fresh buns set between them, Yanshin said he was thankful for being given a servant to make his life easier, but admitted he still had a few things he was curious about. Guqiao Woon lifted his cup and drank slowly, his scarred face giving away nothing, like he had already weighed every answer before Yanshin even spoke. The young master watched that calm sip and a cold sweat slid down his cheek, wondering what his father already knew and what he was hiding. Sitting stiff by the table, Yanshin guessed his father had taken them in fully aware of who they were, and started to wonder what kind of promise he had made with Hyo-gun. Guqiao Woon cut off further questions, telling his son to forget small matters and get ready for the Unified Dragon Assembly the next day, and Yanshin could only answer that he would. Yanshin's eye went wide as the words sank in, the Unified Dragon Assembly crashing over him like a nightmare he was nowhere near ready for. Yanshin stared ahead with a stiff jaw, thinking that if they really wanted to help him, they could just end him here and spare him from that cursed assembly. The attendant swallowed hard, a bead of sweat sliding down his cheek, unsure if the young master was joking or actually serious about rather dying than showing up. The attendant reminded him that the Unified Dragon Assembly was where new sword unit members were picked, asking if he really hated it that much. Yanshin admitted he did, without even trying to hide it. In his mind, Yanshin drifted to wide open fields and quiet hills, the kind of warm, easy world he would rather lose himself in than stand before elders and fight for clan glory. Snapped back to the hall, Yanshin muttered that if he just stopped breathing here and now, at least he would not have to stand in that assembly hall tomorrow. The attendant clutched the scroll and warned him that skipping the assembly would not save him at all, since the clan head would probably deal with him personally if he tried. When the attendant added that Elder Lee would be present and had promised to thrash him if he ran again, Yanshin jumped up in outrage, knowing there would be no easy escape this time. Yanshin's face tightened as he remembered the worst of the elders, the one who had once dragged him back by the head when he tried to run. In his mind, Elder Lee still towered like a monster, shouting that as the only son of the main family, Yanshin had no right to shame the clan. Yanshin remembered the old man who used to grab him by the collar, a strict teacher who still found time to drill manners into him even with a packed schedule. Thinking about it, Yanshin admitted to himself that even his own father had never watched over him that closely, and he wondered how he still ended up such a mess after all that guidance. When the attendant reacted in surprise, Yanshin brushed it off, saying he was only muttering to himself. Outside, the carriage stood ready in the courtyard, and Yanshin was told they would head out as soon as everyone finished preparing. As Yanshin spoke with the attendant about the timing, laughter and excited voices floated up from the steps where the maids were busy praising how pretty Xiao Ah already was, and joking about how many hearts she would crush when she grew up. Yanshin called out to Manhwa, and she flinched, quickly apologizing that she had been caught up fussing over Xiao Ah with the other maids. Hearing Xiao Ah's name, Yanshin frowned and asked if the girl had stirred up trouble again. The maids traded uneasy looks, Manhwa sweating as Xiao Ah shrank between them, clearly unsure how to explain what had just happened. The maids lined up with Xiao Ah in the middle, proudly showing off their work while she fidgeted, cheeks burning from all the praise about how cute she looked. Yanshin froze when he saw her, his face heating up as he realized just how different Xiao Ah looked. Xiao Ah smiled softly, eyes shining, looking more like a blooming flower than the clumsy servant he was used to. Xiao Ah hurried over to the young master, calling out to him with bright eyes while he stumbled back, not ready for her sudden approach. Grinning up at him, Xiao Ah bragged that all the maids had just told her she was really pretty. Yanshin tried to act annoyed, but in his head he had to admit it. Xiao Ah really was pretty, and the thought only made her touch her ear and blush harder. Working up her courage, Xiao Ah looked up at him and asked if he thought she was pretty too. Yanshin's face went bright red, and he burst out in a mix of anger and embarrassment, completely losing his cool at her bold question. Yanshin, still red in the face, barked at everyone to hurry up and get moving, trying to bury the question she had just asked. Xiao Ah puffed her cheeks and let out a small huff, clearly not happy with how he dodged her. As the carriage shot down the road, Xiao leaned out the window with wide eyes, yelling about how amazing it was. She laughed at how fast it moved, like the whole world was rushing past her. Inside the carriage, Xiao chattered nonstop to the maid, admitting she always thought horses were just something you ate. Now, watching them pull the carriage this fast, she could hardly believe how strong they were. Yanshin leaned on the window and asked Muyon where this unified dragon assembly was supposed to be. Muyon explained that it would be held at the Heavenly Exchange, the busiest shopping district in Shaanxi, adding that Elder Li had gone all out to prepare it. Muyon told the young master the trip would take about 4 hours and suggested he get some sleep, so Yanshin agreed, complaining that last night's training had kept him awake. Just as he started to relax, Xiao piped up from inside, rambling about how horse meat smelled strange but tasted great. When Xiao kept going on about the taste, Yanshin lost his patience and shoved a snack straight into her mouth, ordering her to just eat instead of talk. Xiao froze for a heartbeat, then began to nibble on the treat in her mouth, her words finally replaced by small, careful bites. With Xiao standing there in a silly pig outfit focused only on her snack, the carriage at last fell quiet. Yanshin stretched out on the floor with a long sigh, deciding to grab some much-needed sleep while he actually could. Xiao leaned over him in the dim carriage, calling out that he needed to wake up and that he was not getting any more cookies. She paused as the maid reminded her why she was there, then nodded and hurriedly said that she was supposed to tell the young master they had arrived. Yanshin jerked upright with a dazed face, shocked that they were already there while Xiao knelt beside him, pleased she had finally gotten him up. Still half asleep, the young master pushed the curtain aside and squinted out, trying to see where they had ended up. Outside, the Heavenly Exchange spread out in front of them, streets packed with people and glowing stalls that made the whole place feel like a huge festival. As Yanshin stepped down and stretched his stiff body, Xiao leaned out of the carriage, marveling at how crowded it was and blurting out that something nearby smelled amazingly tasty. A well-dressed man stepped forward with an open hand, saying the young master must be worn out from the long ride and inviting him to come inside and rest. The man introduced himself as Chun Ishil, vice merchant head of the Heavenly Exchange, and warmly welcomed Yanshin, calling him the rising star of the Gu clan. Yanshin clasped his hands and introduced himself with a bright smile, acting like the perfect polite heir of the Gu clan. Chun Ishil praised how smoothly the first day had gone thanks to Elder Li and Yanshin's sister, then said the young master must be worn out and offered to guide him to his room. Hearing Chun call her Miss Gu made Yanshin picture his furious sister, and he muttered to himself that this was really starting to test his patience. As Chun Ishil led the group through the lantern-lit walkway, Yanshin followed behind, silently praying he would not bump into his sister here. Inside the corridor, Chun slowed as a girl in red stood ahead of them, and Yanshin's steps faltered the moment he recognized that familiar back. His sister stood there by the open doors, arms tense and eyes sharp, and Yanshin knew his hope of avoiding her had just crashed into reality. His sister clicked her tongue, blue eyes narrowing with clear annoyance, already fed up just from the sight of him. Yanshin forced out a polite greeting to his sister, but she folded her arms and coldly told him that even hearing him say hello ticked her off. Yanshin swore he would stay quiet and not cause trouble, acting like she had nothing to worry about. His sister exploded at that, yelling that she had never been worried about him in the first place. The sister's glare cut through the air, and both Yanshin and Xiao just stood there, not sure what set her off this hard. Xiao shrank behind Yanshin's back, gripping his robe with shaky fingers as if he were the only safe thing in the hallway. His sister let out a long breath, her eyes showing more exhaustion than rage. She muttered that some habits never fade and asked if he planned to pull his usual stunts even. Yanshin planted his hands on his hips and asked what she was even talking about, acting like her complaint made no sense. His sister said she had honestly believed he was different now, but that people like him never truly change, her words cutting as she slid the door shut. The door shut with a dull thud, leaving Yanshin and Xiao standing alone in the hallway with her words still hanging in the air. Yanshin frowned, still not getting why his sister blew up like that, and the whole group shuffled down the hall in stiff silence. Even the escort and the servant looked nervous, while Xiao peeked out from behind his back, clinging to him like he was her shield. Yanshin finally spoke up, saying they should just head out and tossing in a quick apology for the mess with his sister. Xiao just laughed it off, saying brothers and sisters were always like that anyway. She told him he must be tired and urged him to keep moving. Yanshin hesitated, then asked if they could swing by one more place before calling it a night. Their destination rose up ahead, a massive ring-shaped arena lit in deep red, big enough to swallow the whole district around it. From the railing, Xiao stared down with shining eyes, amazed that any building could be this huge. Yanshin watched her excitement and let out a small, awkward laugh, pretending the sight did not impress him just as much. Looking over the glowing arena, Yanshin remembered how merchants measured each other by how much money they burned on events like this. Even with that in mind, this place felt like they had gone way past normal showing off. The day's events were all about praising the sword units for their hard work, filling the stands with flags and cheers. Tomorrow, this same stage would turn harsh, as fierce duels decided who was strong enough to join those ranks. Yanshin told himself he was just here to watch, nothing more. Under the bright moon, he leaned on the railing with Xiao, acting like this was just a fun stop. Behind them, that twisted shadow of his past rose up, red eyes glowing, as if reminding him that trouble always followed wherever he stood still. A sharp chill ran through him, cutting straight through the easy mood from before. The chill turned into raw terror when that red shadow rushed straight at him. Yanshin's mind blanked, and he threw his arms up, thinking only that he had to block or be crushed. Instead of getting hit by some nightmare, Yanshin found his head trapped in a rough grip, The second elder had snuck up behind him, laughing as Xiao Ah flinched at how sudden it was. The second elder joked that Yanshin always bolted whenever he showed up, so he almost skipped this time too. He added that a certain someone had promised to fold him in half if he dared not come. Xiao Ah blurted out, asking who would say something that harsh. The second elder just pointed at himself with a straight face, as if that explained everything. The second elder chuckled that Yanshin had gotten bold enough to talk back to him. The young master just stared up at the old man's grinning face and muttered that the whole thing made him feel sick. Inwardly, Yanshin sighed, thinking how the second elder had always hovered around him for no clear reason. He guessed it was because he was the clan head's only son, which made him feel more like a prized pet than a person. Xiao Ah's eyes sparkled as she pointed out a bear design, cheerfully saying how tasty bears were, and even throwing horses into the mix. She went on about how soft and tender the meat was, while Yanshin and the elder stared at her like they had just met a tiny monster. The second elder's eyes went wide and red, as if he had just heard something truly cursed. Xiao Ah shrank in on herself, stammering the word again in a tiny voice, suddenly unsure if talking about tender bear meat had been a bad idea. The wind tugged at the red flag above the arena, as the old man finally said that the girl's talk about eating bears was starting to worry him. The second elder burst into a laugh and pointed at Xiao Ah, joking that with how close she stuck to Yanshin, she almost looked like his concubine. Yanshin groaned and jabbed a thumb at her outfit, saying she was clearly just a servant while Xiao Ah hid behind him, cheeks burning. The second elder shrugged like he would let it go, then clicked his tongue and complained that the truth was far more boring than what he had hoped. The second elder reminded Yanshin that the Unified Dragon Assembly started tomorrow and that even as a mere spectator he needed rest, so he should head back now. Xiao Ah was already dashing down the walkway, yelling for the young master to hurry before the bear-like grandpa decided to eat them, and Yanshin gave the elder a stiff goodnight. Yanshin paused mid-step when the second elder added that he had one more thing to say, while Xiao Ah tugged at him from ahead, urging the young master to move faster. Grinning wide, the second elder drew his hand across his neck and warned that if Yanshin ever tried to run away from him again, things would not end well. Xiao Ah hugged herself and whispered if that bear-like grandpa was really going to eat Yanshin. And the young master dryly answered that the old man would probably strangle her first, as the elder's heavy steps echoed closer down the hall. Under the moonlight, the second elder watched Yanshin walk away and admitted to himself that there was something strange about that boy. Down below, Yanshin trudged along with Xiao Ah glued to his back, completely unaware that the old monster's interest in him had just deepened. Morning came bright and clear, and the flags of countless clans snapped in the wind above the city. The day of the Unified Dragon Assembly finally arrived, and a river of people already snaked across the plaza toward the entrance. Yanshin stared at the endless line and sighed, thinking he had come early, only to realize the matches would probably not start until midday. Looking over the plaza, Yanshin noted that anyone from the Shaanxi clans, or anyone who could prove who they were, was lining up to take part, and even he was shocked by how many had shown up. As they moved along the street, Yanshin admitted that joining a sword unit could change a person's whole life, but Xiao Ah barely listened, more worried about something else entirely. Xiao Ah shook so hard behind him that her teeth almost chattered as she asked if that bear-like grandpa was going to show up and take her head, even begging to send the old man off to hibernate since it was already spring, leaving Yanshin wondering what was wrong with her. From above, the three of them looked tiny in the crowd as Yanshin grumbled that if Xiao Ah was this scared, she should have stayed in her quarters. But since the Sword Supreme had told him to keep her by his side, all he could do was complain that it was hot while she refused to let go. Yanshin casually points at the guard and claims their escort could handle the bear-like elder, and Xiao Ah's eyes light up as if she has just been saved. The guard quietly insists he could never touch the second elder and even scolds Yanshin for calling that monster a bear. With a straight face, Yanshin sighs that there is no choice and suggests they just hand over Xiao Ah instead, sending the girl into a full-blown panic. Staring at the steaming baskets, Xiao Ah tells herself this is the day she is finished, and that if everyone is happy with her head, she will accept it, only for Yanshin to quickly insist he was not serious. With tears streaming down her face, Xiao Ah whines that she is going to lose her head today, and Yanshin, now a bit annoyed, tells her again that he was only messing with her. When Xiao Ah stops wailing, Yanshin lets out a long breath, and the busy street feels peaceful for a moment. Watching the two of them, the guard remarks that Yanshin treats his little servant Y, far better than most young masters would. While Xiao Ah nearly drools into the steamers, Yanshin grumbles that she even begged him for dumpling and admits to himself that after everything from his past life, he still has no idea how to treat her, since she barely understands what being a servant even means. The guard just laughs and points out that, confused or not, Yanshin still went out of his way to buy it for her. As Yanshin looks away, the guard just smiles at his back, clearly pleased by how much this so-called failure of a young master cares for the girl trailing him. Yanshin frowns and jabs a finger at the guard, suddenly bothered by the fact that this man has heard rumors about him and wants to know how long he has actually been following him. The guard presses his hands together and admits it has only been about 2 weeks since he was ordered to watch over the young master, which is just long enough to hear stories but not truly know him. Yanshin thinks that with a guard like this, he is not sure who is luckier, him or the man beside him. But that thought dies the moment he spots Xiao Ah wandering too close to the stall and calls out to her in shock. Elsewhere, a woman in black robes looks down at a nervous attendant and tells him he should not be walking around so carelessly when the area is this dangerous. The woman's tone softens a little as she adds that he is overthinking things, clearly used to danger in a way he is not. The attendant waves his hands and hurriedly says there is no way anyone would come after her when the Gu family is full of strong men ready to step in. The woman answers in a flat voice, asking if he truly believes nothing could happen just because there are so many people packed into this place. Hearing that, Yanshin stiffens and feels a chill run down his back, thinking that her calm warning about danger sounds strangely ominous. Woman in black is walking with her guard when her eyes land on Yanshin in the crowd, and both of them freeze like they have just run into a nightmare they hoped never to see again. A few steps later, Yanshin and his guard find themselves standing right across from the woman and her escort, with no way to pretend they have not noticed each other. The woman's face tightens, a drop of sweat sliding down as she stares at Yanshin, clearly shaken that he is here of all places. Yanshin leans toward his guard and speaks in a low whisper, making sure only the man beside him hears his thoughts about the strange pair watching them. He points out how the woman and her guard look like they just walked into something awful and quietly asks his own guard if he recognizes them, already sure he would remember faces that unsettled. In his mind, Yanshin breaks down her look one part at a time, noting the hair that falls to her shoulders and those small dark eyes that feel oddly familiar. His gaze drops to her hand and catches the dark ring with a purple stone, a piece of jewelry that carries a special mark only visible when you really look at it. As the gem fills his sight, Yanshin remembers exactly what that hidden mark stands for, knowing this ring ties the woman straight to the Hebei Peng clan. In his mind, a cold image rose up of the Hebei Peng clan, a place where even their training yard held blades wrapped in blue fire that could burn the air itself. That harsh image faded, replaced by soft blossoms, the kind that filled the garden where he had once met her under a warm spring sky. He remembered the woman sitting across from him back then, lips pressed, cheeks faintly red, acting far more gentle than the sharp gaze she carried today. In that bright room, with only a table between them, Yanshin sat across from the woman who had once been promised to him, the former fiancé now standing in front of him as a stranger tied to the Hebei Peng clan. The woman from the Peng clan stepped forward, eyes sharp, demanding to know what Yanshin was doing here as her escort stiffened behind her. Yanshin did not flinch at all and calmly shot the question back at her, asking why she was the one showing up here. The Peng woman waved a hand and said she was only here on business, pointing out that his clan did not own all of Shaanxi, and joking that she could start reporting her every step if he really wanted. Her temper flared as she shouted that he was being rude and seemed to have forgotten she was still a year older. Yanshin only laughed, tossing out a light apology as if that settled everything. While the two sides faced each other, Xiao Ah hugged the towering steamer and cheerfully reminded Yanshin to come back if he had really bought the dumplings. Yanshin turned his back on the Peng woman, saying he hoped she enjoyed her stay here, while Xiao Ah followed behind him, almost skipping under the weight of the steaming tower. Without waiting for an answer, Yanshin said they were busy and headed off with his guard and Xiao Ah, leaving the Peng woman staring after them in mild shock. Left alone, the Peng woman managed a stiff farewell, wishing him a pleasant stay no matter his reason for coming. As Yanshin disappeared into the crowd, she sighed, thinking that his timing could not be worse when she already had her hands full with her own brother. Watching Yanshin walk off with Xiao Ah hugging that tower of dumplings, the Peng woman wondered if having such a cute servant at his side meant he had softened. Yanshin's face, though, stayed as dull as ever, giving nothing away about what he was really thinking. That blank look hid an old memory of himself, younger and meaner, barking at a girl and throwing her status in her face, calling her nothing more than a concubine's daughter. The girl did not take it quietly. Her hand shot out, clutching his collar and dragging him toward her with raw anger. She shoved him down and leaned over him, eyes blazing, demanding he repeat what he had just said as a heavy, dark pressure started to pour off her. Her smile twisted as that purple aura thickened, and she pushed back that if she was treating him harshly, it was only because he had been just as cruel first. Standing over the beaten boy, the girl admitted she had been ready to swallow her pride and accept an arranged marriage, all for her clan's sake. She went on, saying she had even been willing to ignore every ugly rumor about him if it helped the Peng clan, while her maid grabbed her arm and begged her to calm down as Yanshin sat there, wiping the blood from his lip in stunned silence. The girl jerked her arm free and pushed her maid aside, too angry and hurt to let anyone pull her back from the fight. Back then, Yanshin lay on the floor dazed, while the Peng clan girl loomed over him with a chair raised, purple energy burning off her like fire. She spat that she did not care about the arranged marriage anymore and swore that for insulting her like a concubine's daughter, she would make him pay. Back in the present, the Peng woman looked down with a hard gaze, thinking that nothing about him had really changed since that ugly day. Xiao Ah hugged the tower of steaming baskets, claiming she could handle it, but Yanshin calmly took the top stack from her while the guard rushed in to help as well. The guard was told to mind his post instead, and Yanshin even suggested they save some dumplings for Honghua, turning the walk back into a small feast run. Watching him fuss over a servant and even think of sharing food, the Peng woman stared in quiet shock, a bead of sweat running down as her old picture of him started to wobble. As Yanshin walked ahead with the baskets, something about his air felt strangely different to her. The Peng woman rubbed her forehead and sighed, telling herself there was no way he had grown up and that he was probably just in a rare good mood. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the three of them head toward the hall, arms full of food. A small, unwanted thought crept in that maybe, just maybe, the crazy boy from her past had actually started to change. They stepped through the gate with their baskets, only for the tall Gu youth beside Yanshin to snap around and bark in shock at something they had just been told. shattering the easy mood. Yeonchin and Seol Ah froze with their baskets as the guard panicked more about the dumplings than the shouting. A Gu elder tried to steady the room, saying they would solve nothing by yelling. But the black-clad visitor slammed the table and roared that he had no time to waste and demanded to know who would answer for him if he got caught. The visitor's eye twitched, and his anger slipped into real fear as he demanded what they meant by him being caught. Outside, the courtyard was packed with hopeful martial artists lining up at the Gu clan's desk, the whole place buzzing like a festival despite the brewing trouble at the front. One of the Gu staff snapped back that he never said anything about the man being caught and asked if the visitor was trying to joke with him. Walking in with the steaming baskets, Yeonchin grumbled about having to help, while the others reminded him that anyone could join the unified dragon assembly as long as they could prove who they were. Yeonchin and the tall youth watched with tired faces as a squad of Gu martial artists stepped up, calmly saying that scuffles over assembly entry happened all the time and that the Gu clan's standby fighters would settle this one too. The Gu official laid a firm hand on the visitor's shoulder and told him they should end it here before he made things worse for himself. Instead of calming down, the visitor seized the man's wrist and with a flash of cold energy, hurled the Gu official over his shoulder. The Gu official crashed into the floor with a thunderous impact, and the whole hall jolted as the visitor's outburst turned into a real fight. The Gu clerk shot back up, slammed the desk and barked at the visitor, demanding what he thought he was doing. The stranger just leaned on the desk with a lazy look, saying that throwing the clerk should count as proof of his skill and asking if he could enter now. While the visitor shouted that he had already shown his skills, Yeonchin and the others stood outside with steaming baskets, staring in quiet disbelief at how dumb this was getting. The tall Gu youth wondered if they should help, while Seol Ah bounced beside Yeonchin, excitedly replaying how one man slammed the other and calling it awesome. The tall youth told Yeonchin they should just head in and let the Gu fighters sort it out, even as Yeonchin hesitated. At the desk, the clerk snapped that they had their own rules and that no one got in without proper proof of who they were. When the stranger argued that his skill should count as proof, the clerk grew even more flustered, saying that relying only on strength was an even bigger problem. The visitor drew in a sharp breath and roared back, ready to throw his status in their faces. His shout rang across the courtyard as he claimed to be the young clan head of the Peng clan and demanded to know if they were looking down on him, leaving the Gu staff and even Yeonchin's group frozen for a moment. Yeonchin snapped his head around, sweat running down his cheek as the words sank in. The guard and Seol Ah turned too, both staring toward the desk, stunned that the loudmouth was actually claiming to be the young clan head of the Peng clan. The tall Gu youth frowned up at the sky, wondering if he had misheard, because there was no way that idiot at the desk was really the Peng clan's young clan head. Seol Ah hugged the steaming basket with a bright grin, caring far more about the fresh dumplings in her arms than the big-name clan drama playing out a few steps away. Snow covered the Gu clan like a white blanket, turning the whole place quiet and still as the cold morning sank in. While Seol Ah stopped in front of Yeonchin's room, eyes wide as she demanded to know what he was doing out here in this cold. Yeonchin cheerfully warmed his hands by the flames, bragging that he was even roasting a sweet potato while he was at it. He said he would ignore the fact that she had set this up right outside his room, then asked what she planned to do with the plaque she was gripping. The young master admitted the sweet potato was taking too long, so he figured he would toss the plaque into the fire to make it burn hotter. Her hand shot out and cracked against Yeonchin's head, and he yelped that she was hitting her own older brother. Seol Ah coolly told him he had it coming and reminded him that the thing in his hand was not trash but firewood meant for proper use. Seol Ah sighed and told him he needed to act more like the clan's successor. The word hung in the air, and Yeonchin stared ahead, repeating it in his head with a bitter twist as if it did not quite fit him. By the small fire, Seol Ah watched him crouch in the snow and admitted she could never tell what went on in his head, saying he had talent, skill, and even the title of successor, yet always seemed so dissatisfied. Yeonchin let out a weak laugh trying to play it off, but as he stared up into the falling snow, he finally admitted the truth to her. He wanted to get away from this place. Seol Ah calmly points out that if he hates this place so much, he could just leave for a while and return later. Yeonchin freezes at how easy she makes it sound, the idea landing in his head like a spark in dry wood. That one line from her settles it, and Yeonchin quietly decides he really will step out of the Gu clan for a while. The young master clenches the paper in his fist until it crumples, squeezing all his frustration into that one tight grip. Yeonchin leans close and tells Seol Ah where he plans to go, and her eyes sharpen as she realizes he is talking about leaving Shaanxi itself. As he thinks about following that path out of Shaanxi, Yeonchin wonders why that person had to go so far in the first place. Yeonchin suddenly bursts out in anger, raging that after everything he has shown them, they still refuse to let him move forward. He yells that he wants to join the great unified dragon assembly, throwing his true wish right in their faces. Elsewhere in the hall, the younger disciples whisper that Dark Knight Blade is a skill only the Peng clan's true blood can use, so the boy claiming to be Peng Wujin might actually be the real thing. One of them decides this is way above his pay grade and tries to sneak out, but the white-haired elder grabs Peng Wujin by the collar, saying that anyone who knows that technique cannot be a simple fraud. The white-bearded elder just grinned, ruffled the kid's hair, and said Peng Wujin looks strong enough, so they should just let him join. Peng Wujin laced his fingers together on the table, steadying his hands as he prepared to speak. Peng Wujin bowed deeply, announcing himself as the Peng clan's successor and greeting the grandmaster of the Gu clan with full formality. The grandmaster burst into loud laughter at hearing his old title again and cheerfully said Peng Wujin could take part. While a nervous elder hurried to remind him, they still had no proof the boy was really the Peng's successor. The mustached elder calmly pointed out that the kid was the spitting image of Peng Aoi and carried the same thick build their clan was known for. And Yanshin had to admit to himself that the two really did match. Their eyes locked onto the dark ring on Wujin's finger, the same heirloom worn by Peng Aoi. And with that, even the doubters had to accept that this really was the Peng clan's successor. With the matter of his blood settled, the Grandmaster leaned forward, smiling wide, and asked why a Peng successor wanted to enter a test meant for picking Gu clan sword squad members. A question Yanshin found himself wanting answered too. When Peng Wujin finally shared his reason, the Grandmaster laughed so hard he called it a great answer, while the boy at his side stared in disbelief, asking if the guy was crazy enough to do this without his family's permission. Peng Wujin laughed like it was nothing as he admitted he had bolted from home, since there was no way his clan would ever let him join this test. The Grandmaster burst out laughing, shouting to Yanshin that the boy had actually run away from home to get here and wondering out loud if he was an idiot, while Yanshin just frowned beside him. After calming down, the Grandmaster eyed Peng Wujin's stance, asked his age, and was stunned to hear he was only 23, calling him a monster the Peng clan had raised. Thinking of the talent standing before him, the Grandmaster glanced toward his own youngsters and grumbled that he wished their little fool would take notes from Peng Wujin. Yanshin's companions whispered that the Grandmaster had just called him a little idiot. And while Yanshin snapped at them to stop rubbing it in, he grudgingly admitted that if this really was Peng Wujin, then the word monster fit him. As they mulled over the jab, Yanshin muttered that he was just as dumb, then wondered if the old man had said it because someone else from the Peng clan was already here. Not far away, a young woman in dark robes sprinted toward the grounds, sweat on her face as she yelled for her brother with another youth hurrying after her. Peng Wujin turned toward the familiar voice with a bright grin, and the Grandmaster leaned in beside him, amused as he welcomed the newcomer. Peng Aoi slams her fist into Peng Wujin's face so hard that blood sprays across the wall, while the Grandmaster just watches from the side. A roaring pillar of blue energy blasts up from the courtyard, forcing Yanshin and the others to rush in as the ground trembles under the impact. Wrapped in a storm of blue light, Peng Aoi glares down at her brother and coldly demands to hear what excuse he has for all of this. Peng Wujin stares ahead with his face puffed up and shaking, lifting a hand as if to beg for mercy, but unable to form a proper answer. Before he can even finish asking to be spared, another strike crashes into Peng Wujin's swollen face, making him jerk back in agony. Peng Aoi keeps hammering away at her brother, her fists a blur, while Yanshin's group quietly wonders if she might actually go too far, and the Grandmaster jokes that Peng clan bodies can take it. Curled up on the floor, Peng Wujin bawls and screams for the Grandmaster to save him. Still holding Peng Wujin up by his hair, Peng Aoi bares her teeth and whirls toward the voice that dares to tell her she has gone far enough. The Grandmaster stands with his arms crossed and calmly calls out to Aoi, making it clear that the beating ends now. Peng Aoi finally calmed down, gently patting his brother's head as he bowed, and he introduced himself to Yanshin with a polite apology for making them watch such a petty family fight. Yanshin brushed it off, saying that meeting someone as ridiculous as Peng Wujin had been pretty entertaining. Yanshin lifted the bloodied cloth with a tired look and said he would remember this whole mess, promising to pay them back properly one day. With that, he told the servant it was time for them to head out. Outside the gate, the attendant snapped at Yanshin, asking if he really wanted to stir things up again after all that. He just shrugged and pointed out that he was not the one who had been turned into a punching bag. Yanshin's eyes hardened, the playfulness gone, and he asked her if anything about his face made it look like he was joking. The girl stiffened, a drop of sweat sliding down her cheek as she realized Yanshin actually meant every word. A moment later they were already joking again, with the girl grumbling that the Peng clan was boring while Yanshin laughed and asked if the Gu clan and the others were really any better. She guessed they had to be at least more fun than this place. Side Peng Aoi rested a hand on his brother's shoulder and admitted he only wanted to have some fun before the weight of the clan fell on him. He said the only way to dodge that fate was to end up broken or gone, and he refused both, calling the rest of their relatives beasts who only wore the Peng name. Because of that, he swore that he would be the one to take the clan head seat, not Wujin. Outside the gate, Yanshin touched the spot on his shoulder, where Aoi's hand had rested and thought about how the man had taken on the successor title he never wanted, all to keep that twisted clan from falling into worse hands. The second elder rubbed his chin, saying he wanted to help but that the Peng clan's mess was too risky for them. Yanshin walked beside him, clearly not ready to drop the matter. Yanshin cut in and said he had another idea if the elder was that worried. The two attendants traded a startled look, unsure what crazy thing their young master was about to drag them into now. When the second elder finally shared his plan, the girl in black snapped that he had lost it, while Yanshin raised his hands, not sure how to calm either of them down. The second elder just laughed and said they would settle it with a quick match, only 10 moves to decide who came out on top. Peng Wujin narrowed his eyes and asked if that was really all they were putting on the line. He went further, saying they could count it as his loss if the elder's side even managed to lay a hand on him. Blue light tore across the courtyard as they took their places, and Wujin declared that if they could touch him within 10 moves, he would admit defeat. Peng Wujin shot forward like a blue streak, his blade cutting through the air as he went straight for the elder. Blue flame poured down as Peng Wujin swung with everything he had, aiming right at the elder's head. The second elder did not even uncross his arms and lightly scolded him for rushing in so fast. When loud laughter rolled out from below, Wujin's face tightened as he realized his strike had not even scratched the old monster. Then the second elder finally moved, his body bursting with red light as he drove a fist forward. His punch crashed down like a falling hammer, turning the air itself into a roaring pillar of power aimed straight at Peng Wujin. Gu Yonseo rested her sword on her shoulder, standing tall in the arena while Yanshin waited at the far end. The elders called it a clash between the two stars who would carry the Gu clan's future, turning a simple spar into a big show. The flame sword Gu Yonseo grinned like this was the best day of her life, soaking in the cheers. At the same time, everyone was reminded that the boy across from her, Gu Yanshin, was still the first heir of the Gu clan. Yanshin's face stiffened as he tried to figure out why he was even standing here. Sparring in front of everyone was bad enough, but doing it against his own sister felt completely pointless. The second elder's fist landed, and Peng Wujin shot into the sky on a roaring pillar of light, the ground cracking under the force. In just one blow, the proud genius was turned into a ragdoll. Peng Wujin crashed back down, vanishing into a thick cloud of dust that swallowed half the yard. The second elder just watched the mess he had made, calm as if he had only swatted a fly. Yanshin stared up at the old man, pointing out that the elder was only supposed to dodge. The second elder acted clueless, pretending he had never agreed to any such thing. The second elder waved off the sight of Peng Wujin sprawled on the ground, saying he had controlled his strength and that the boy would wake up soon. He calmly pushed all blame onto himself if the Peng clan complained, while Yanshin silently wished the old fool a lonely end. Peng Aoi, watching her cousin laid out, admitted it was almost a relief, since who knew what kind of trouble he would have stirred up if he had stayed on his feet. The second elder joked that the silly spar had been needed to keep Peng Wujin from causing problems, making it sound like a wise choice. When Peng Aoi questioned him, he burst out laughing and admitted he had really done it just because watching it sounded funny. Xiao Ah grabbed Yanshin's arm and tried to pull him back, begging him to stay away from the scary bear-like elder who had just flattened a man with one move. Xiao Ah bounced in place, acting out how the wind roared and the elder sent Peng Wujin flying, her eyes shining like she had just watched the best show ever. Yanshin could only wonder how this overly honest kid was supposed to be the one who saved the world. The bear-like elder loved her reaction, praised her sharper eye compared to gloomy Yanshin, and decided she deserved a present. The elder lifted a bright, glossy snack that looked like a tiny crown of dough, and Xiao Ah's jaw dropped as if he had just pulled out a treasure from a legend. Xiao Ah cheered that she had liked Bear Grandpa from the very start, hugging her new treat like it was sacred. The elder laughed, saying he knew she would, then glanced at Yanshin and asked if the young master felt slighted that only his servant got a present, promising he had a gift prepared for him as well. Yanshin stared at the elder, wondering what kind of reward he was talking about, only to hear that after the unified dragon assembly he would be dragged into a public exhibition match as part of the deal. Later in the arena, Gu Yonseo rested her practice weapon on her shoulder and eyed her brother, asking why the supposed heir of the Gu clan had shown up without a sword. Yanshin rolled his shoulder and glanced back at her, honestly wondering if he had ever even used a sword in the past the way everyone seemed to think. Yanshin thought back to the Gu flame wheel arts, knowing they could run through all kinds of weapons but burned brightest through a blade or bare knuckles. In his hands the flames always answered better to his fists, so he had tossed the sword aside and never looked back. Even so, he could not help wondering if showing up like this, empty-handed in front of everyone, would just make him look strange. Gu Yonseo waves off the whole sword issue, saying he can use whatever he wants. In her mind, her sharp temper is finally paying off, and she feels almost thankful for this chance. A crooked smile spreads across her face as she thinks about how much fun this is going to be. Yanshin frowns and repeats the word in his head, wondering how any of this could count as an opportunity. His sister answers without a hint of shame, saying this is exactly the kind of chance she has been waiting for. Gu Yonseo finally explains that this is a proper chance to rough up her little brother and do it with a crowd watching. Her face flushes with wild joy, like she has just been handed her favorite toy. A bead of sweat runs down Yanshin's face as he glares at the elder. He demands to know why he has to step into this match at all, and why his opponent has to be his own sister, while the old man just tells him to calm down. The elder laughs like this is the best joke he has heard all week, while Yanshin asks if he truly wants to watch him get beaten and lose in front of everyone. The old man's smile softens a bit as he calls Yanshin's name. Looking down at him, the elder asks if he truly means to step into the ring already planning to lose. Yanshin's face tightens as the question hits a sore spot he has been trying to ignore. Yanshin repeats the words planning to lose in his head and knows he cannot treat this new life that lightly. At the same time, he hates the idea of burning strength on a match that never even existed in his past life. He decides he has to guard this one chance to restart, even if it means holding back in a fight that feels pointless. Gu Yonseo tightened her grip on the wooden sword, staring straight at her little brother. In her head she spat out how much she hated him and then signaled for the match to begin. Gu Yanshin's eyes twitched as he heard the venom in her voice, calling him brother while saying she despised him. He suddenly understood this was not a light spar, but payback she had been saving for years. Gu Yonseo rushed in without holding back, her blade drawing a red arc that ripped across the stage. Flames and shockwaves trailed behind her as she swung straight for Yanshin. The flame sword hurled another blazing strike that carved the air in front of her. Yanshin bent low and slipped past it, feeling the heat brush the back of his neck as he fled to the side. Their feet hammered against the tiles, one set chasing and the other fleeing. Each step left streaks of light as they circled the arena like a pair of hunting beasts. Gu Yonseo's slash spread out like a crimson fan, filling the space in front of her. Yanshin twisted his body at the last moment, letting the force skim past as he barely kept ahead of her reach. Watching him slip past another of her 3-star strikes, Gu Yonseo's eyes widened. She could not understand how someone she still saw as a weakling was dodging attacks that should crush any normal kid. Gu Yanchen knew he was only staying alive by reading her rhythm and moving half a beat before each swing, and even that was already leaving his lungs burning. To him, it was proof that his body still lagged far behind his mind. As he backed away from another charge, he started wondering if it would be easier to just take one clean hit and let this pointless match end. Gu Yanchen hesitated for a breath, wondering if his body would even stay in one piece if he stopped running and took a full strike from his sister. Another blazing sweep tore past his legs, and Yanchen knew he was doing nothing but slipping away at the last second, with no strength to answer back. Gu Yonseo lunged in close, fingers clamping onto his chest as she finally caught hold of his robe. Using his clothes like a handle, the flame sword twisted her body and whipped Yanchen through the air, red light swirling around them. His body jerked helplessly along with the motion, fabric screaming, as his robe stretched to the limit. Gu Yonseo yanked him down and slammed him into the stage, a pillar of red power bursting up as his robe tore and dust exploded around them. Gasping, Yanchen grumbled in his head that swings packed with that much clear intent were almost easy to dodge, then stared at his shredded robe and wondered how much hatred she had to pour into a strike just to ruin his clothes like this. Gu Yonseo lowered her head as red heat coiled around her, thinking of all the years she had pushed herself past her limits only to be told a woman could never lead the clan. And now that same position was being handed to the brother who had thrown his life away like trash. Gu Yonseo carved a blazing line across the floor, flames licking up her sword as she rushed him. She asked if he could even understand the weight of the years she had thrown into this, only to watch him waste everything. Flames whirled around them as Yonseo swung again and again, each strike forcing Yanchen to scramble back. She screamed that this was all he ever did, that every time things got hard he just ran away. The flame sword slid past his clumsy guard, heat brushing his ribs as he barely slipped aside. She hurled at him that he never did anything, that he only dodged and hid instead of standing his ground. Her foot slammed into his stomach, knocking the breath out of him as he flew back across the stage. Yonseo spat that he had no talent and did not even try, that he never once put in real effort while others bled for their place. Yanchen turned and ran, clutching his side, while his sister stormed after him with fire at her back. She yelled that if he was going to live such an useless life, wasting his name and their clan's strength, then there was no point in him being here at all. Gu Yonseo's eyes burned red as she glared at him, sweat and tears mixing on her face. In that moment she shouted that he should just vanish from their lives altogether. She went even further, snarling that if he was so worthless he might as well vanish the same way their mother had. As Yonseo hurled a blazing strike straight for his neck, Yanchen's eyes sharpened, the easy dodging gone as he braced for something he could not laugh off. Gu Yonseo froze for a heartbeat, her breath rough and sweat sliding down her cheek, as the weight of her own words and the killing intent behind that last swing finally hit her. Gu Yanchen's hand shot out and clamped around the wooden sword, stopping Gu Yonseo's swing cold. The blade shook in his grip, but this time he refused to back away. To the bright moon, Yanchen held his sister's arm in place, her sword frozen beside him. The arena was quiet for breath, dust curling around them as the fire in her charge finally met something that would not move. Gu Yanchen glared at her, his eyes burning red in the dark as he tightened his grip on the sword. The jab about their mother had crossed a line, and the pressure pouring off him now felt nothing like the useless brother she thought she knew. Back then, Gu Yonseo walked through the clan grounds with calm pride, already shining brighter than anyone her age. Even so, the clan had already decided that Gu Yanchen, the concubine's quiet son, would be the next clan head. In those days, Yanchen's mother would sit with them in the sun, smiling as the two half-siblings rolled around her lap, and her warmth made it easy to accept Yanchen's place. But after his mother was gone, Gu Yanchen began lashing out, his temper slamming into servants and clansmen like a clenched fist. Whispers spread that the young master's hands wandered where they should not, yet the elders looked away, since in the Gu clan the clan head had always been a man and his place was fixed. Her mind, Gu Yanchen was no longer just a spoiled heir but a twisted shadow with burning eyes, the very picture of everything rotten in their clan. Snapped back to the training yard, Yonseo stared at him in shock, shaken by the brother in front of her who felt nothing like the useless monster she remembered. Gu Yonseo poured her strength into a blazing swing, flames carving a bright arc across the stage. But Yanchen dropped under it at the last moment, and the blow smashed uselessly into the floor. Her eyes widened as Yanchen's fist sliced past her cheek, close enough to sting her skin and prove that he was no longer the slow, clumsy brother she remembered. One of the young spectators could only breathe out in awe, stunned that a spar between siblings looked more like a real fight between trained warriors. A young lady from the Peng clan hugged her knees on the bench, whispering that Yonseo was her age yet already far ahead, then asked her attendant what the murmuring crowd was saying about the duel. Her attendant answered that she would not catch a single word, since the second elder had wrapped the arena in his energy, so loose talk would never reach the young noble's ears. Young Master Peng joked about his sister bragging of their clan with such a plain face, earning a flat, annoyed look before she told him to hide in the unified dragon assembly until his swollen cheek healed. As a servant handed him an ice pouch, he greeted it like a snack, and the group chatted about how the fighter on stage was the Sword Phoenix's younger sibling, already a 3-star with swordplay and energy control smooth enough to impress even them. Still rubbing his cheek with a cold pouch, young Master Peng asked which of the two was the Sword Phoenix's younger sibling, only for the smiling attendant to point out that both the attacker and the one dodging shared that fearsome sister. Hearing that, young Master Peng leaned in with bright eyes, thrilled that the Gu clan held more than just the famed Sword Phoenix, while his sister watched him silently, weighing what that interest might mean. The The Peng girl watched the fight and thought about Gu Yanshin, deciding he just wanted to play around before the clan chained him with duty. In her mind, the wild light in his eyes was something he could only have now before he became the next clan head. On the stage, Gu Yonseo's eyes went wide as she felt his next move coming and told herself she had to dodge right now. Instead of pulling back, the younger sister roared forward, her body wrapped in flame as she swung with all she had, certain that this last strike would be hers. Gu Yanshin spoke over the roar of the flames, saying he understood her and that it was fine if she resented him, since he had lived his whole life being treated that way. His sister's face twisted with anger, yet she only drove her burning blade in harder. Yanshin's lips curled in a tight line as he added that her earlier words had been annoying, but he would let them slide. While Yonseo glared at him through the heat, Yanshin told her that, just as he was trying to accept her, she should also understand why he was pushing her like this. Then Yanshin moved, his body drawing a burning line through the air as he tore straight through her flames with a single, overwhelming strike. Gu Yonseo's eyes shook, a small sun of his flame burning in her pupil as cold sweat slid down, and she finally felt just how far ahead her brother now stood. Gu Yanshin's flame roared out, tearing straight through his sister's burning strike and swallowing her guard in one sweep. Gu Yonseo's body was thrown back, her eyes shaking as the force crushed the last of her will to fight. When the flames faded, Gu Yanshin stood alone on his feet while his sister lay sprawled on the tiles, her sword slipping from her hand. The announcer's shaky voice echoed around the arena, telling everyone that the match was over and that Gu Yanshin had won. As the cheer slowly died away, the sky above the trees darkened, swallowing the heat of the fight in cool shadow. Later, Gu Yanshin sat alone by a quiet gate, away from the crowd, letting the silence press in around him. He could still picture Gu Yonseo screaming that she would have preferred if he had just stayed gone. Under the dark wall, Yanshin hunched over on the bench, letting her words sink in as he sat there, too tired to pretend the wind felt good. Yanshin barely had a moment to brood before his attendants came running through the gate, shouting for their young master like he had just fallen off a cliff. Under the bright moon, the attendant fired off questions, worrying over Yanshin's body first, then the mood inside the arena. The attendant admitted that most people had shown up just to watch Yanshin get beaten, which was exactly why the whole place was buzzing now that the so-called troublemaker had taken down a rising star. Hearing that the second elder was already closing the event, Yanshin decided they should slip away before getting dragged into more talk. Before he could move, Xiao Ah grabbed his attention, staring wide-eyed at the blood on his palm, while he muttered that it just showed he still could not handle his inner fire right. Yanshin tried to wave it off as no big deal, but Xiao Ah shook her head and started fumbling with a strip of cloth, determined to cover the wound herself. Her fingers shook and the bandage twisted in all the wrong ways, yet Yanshin just watched as she kept trying to wrap his hand without letting go. Xiao Ah's eyes filled with tears as she clutched his hand in both of hers, blaming herself for not even knowing how to wrap it right and begging him, in her own way, to stop getting hurt like this. Before Yanshin could answer her, a grinning clan boy hooked an arm around his shoulder from the side, barging in with a loud joke that stomped all over the mood Xiao Ah had just laid bare. Yanshin stiffly gives his name to the Peng heir, who answers just as awkwardly while trying to act polite. Attendant Y steps in with a smooth greeting of his own, and Xiao Ah quietly corrects Peng's silly way of saying Yanshin's fire technique, breaking the tension a little. Peng's attendant looks nervous while the girl all but hides behind his back, clearly done with this whole meeting. Peng glances at them, reads the mood right away, and accepts that they should probably wrap this up. Yanshin rubs his head, thrown off by how casually Peng talks about using this event to make friends with strong people, and even tells him to treat him like an older brother. He cannot tell if this guy is just simple, bold, or both. Yanshin tries to push him away by saying that staying close to someone like him will not help Peng at all. Peng just laughs it off, talks about the famous Sword Phoenix sister, and says it is crazy that such talent was hiding in the Gu family, chatting with Yanshin like they are already old friends. Yanshin can only wonder why this guy is speaking to him so casually. Hearing his sister's title tossed out so easily, Yanshin tilts his head and asks if Peng actually knows Gu Huibai in person. The thought of yet another connection to his overpowered sister makes him wary. Peng throws his head back with a huge grin and proudly claims he and Gu Huibai are incredibly close, like it is the most natural thing in the world. The way he glows with confidence makes it clear he believes every word. Yanshin stares at him with a blank face and quietly decides that anyone who talks like that clearly is not close to his sister at all. To him, Peng's bragging just proves how one-sided that bond really is. Peng marches off with his attendant, grumbling to himself, while the shy girl lingers and watches their backs under the dark sky. She looks more tired than upset, like she is used to cleaning up after his moods. The girl in black stands in front of Yanshin and asks if he has anything left to say about the day their engagement was cut off, her voice tight with nerves while the others watch in awkward silence. Cheeks burning, the girl stares at the ground and admits she went too far when she smashed a chair over him that day. Under the quiet night sky, she lets out a small but honest apology. Yanshin glances away and admits he was the one who mocked her as a concubine's child, saying he was even more childish back then and that taking a chair to the head was something he earned, so she does not need to feel sorry at all. The girl looks up at him, eyes wide and shining, and a gentle smile starts to form as the guilt she carried for years finally loosens. Her smile turns bright as she agrees to his terms, choosing to leave that ugly day in the past. As the girl turns away with her fist tight at her side, she tells Yanshin not to lose what his brother gave him, leaving him standing there clutching his chest and wondering what she even means. He looks down at the wooden tag marked with the Peng name in his hand, and finally understands what she was hinting at. The night over the city felt strangely calm, like the world had finally let that old grudge go. Yanshin stood there with her, staring out at the lights and thinking about all the other messes he still had to clean up. Wai Xiao Ah had already passed out, leaning on the other servant and drooling without a care in the world. Yanshin glanced back at Xiao Ah sleeping on the bench, her mouth wide open, and her name slipped out before he could stop himself. Watching Xiao Ah sleep, Yanshin thought about how none of this matched his memories. From sparring with his sister, he never recalled winning to Xiao Ah joining the clan as a servant in the first place. Looking at Xiao Ah resting so calmly, he wondered if that one small act of kindness toward her had already started to twist fate in a new direction. Yanshin pulled himself away from the quiet porch and decided that once they got back home, he would have to move much faster than he had planned. A strange ripple brushed against Yanshin's senses, sharp enough to make his eyes widen, and he instantly shouted for Muyon to check the demon sensing charm. The guard spun around, confused by the sudden order but already reaching for the charm. Muyon lifted the demon sensing charm with a grin, telling the young master that nothing had changed and that the talisman would light up on its own if a gate from the demon realm opened nearby. So there was no need to panic. Yanshin heard Muyon's calm words and tried to relax, but a stubborn unease clung to him, as if something out there was waiting just beyond what the charm could show. Muyon yanked his horse around, holding the glowing charm high as he yelled for everyone to halt and form up, shouting that a gate to the demon realm had opened and that protecting the young master came before everything else. When he spotted Yanshin right beside him instead of safely in the back, Muyon broke into a sweat and hurriedly tried to drag the young master away, warning him that this place was far too dangerous. Yanshin pulled his arm free and told Muyon to save the scolding for later, making it clear he had no intention of running when a demon gate was opening right in front of his people. The young master pointed down the road with a hard look, telling Muyon to stop fussing over him and pay attention to what was waiting in front of them. Ahead of them, the air had split open into a tall green rift that crackled over the empty road, a clear path straight into the demon realm. While someone reminded the group that a green gate meant the weakest class of monsters, Yanshin tightened his fist and drew blazing goo fire into his hand, treating this so-called danger like a simple problem to solve. His flames roared out in a towering column, crashing into the rushing beasts and wiping them out in an instant, showing exactly why a green gate was something they could handle. Once the flames faded, Yanshin stepped forward without fear, pressing his hand into the charred remains as he went straight for the one thing every monster shared as a weakness. Yanshin lifted a smooth green stone from the charred remains, recognizing it as the monster's core. He thought of how these demonic stones worked like hearts for the beasts, and that once you ripped them out, the bodies collapsed for good, not noticing the new wolf rushing up behind him. He slid under the lunging beast, driving burning energy into its chest, thinking that taking out the stone made even these monsters easy to deal with. Yanshin panted as he tore out another stone, cursing inside when he felt his strength already fading and realizing how hard it was to keep the goo flame wheel arts running. More wolves burst from the gate with eyes blazing red, racing toward him just as his body started to give out. Yanshin's eyes widened at the number of them, and for a heartbeat he wondered if he could even stay standing, let alone keep fighting. Muyon flashed in front of him with blade drawn, cutting a path through the charging wolves and placing his own body between the young master and the snapping jaws. The swordsman's strike exploded into a web of shining arcs that wrapped around the pack, cutting through the monsters in one sweeping motion and giving Yanshin a brief chance to breathe. Yanshin froze as a strange power crawled up from inside him, darker than any flame he knew. The next breath, that energy burst out and dragged his body forward, like something else had taken hold of his legs. Muyon leaned in with an easy smile, asking if the young master was hurt and even thanking him for stepping in earlier. To him, fighting like that seemed normal, almost fun. The swordsman brushed off Yanshin's surprise, saying he finished fast because there were not many monsters. He added that they were the lowest class anyway, nothing worth worrying about. Muyon's smile faded as he pressed the real point, demanding to know what Yanshin had been thinking. He warned that if the air got hurt out here, it would not just be a small problem. Yanshin scratched his cheek with a crooked grin, saying they should just be glad things ended well. At the same time, a dark purple glow leaked from his fist, the energy he had taken in refusing to stay quiet. His eyes snapped wide as the power inside him twisted, no longer just sitting in his hand. It rushed through his body like burning ice, far beyond what he could control. Yanshin dropped, clutching his chest as purple light burst out of him in wild waves. Muyon stepped in without hesitation, driving his sword down to pin the young master's body and force that raging energy to settle. Purple light flared from Yanshin's chest as he screamed, his body shaking so hard he could barely stay on his knees. Muyon dropped beside him, shouting in panic while the other guards rushed over, suddenly more afraid for the air than of any monster. Yanshin bent over, clutching his chest as purple light leaked from his body, that dark power clawing at him from the inside. A sick, familiar dread crept up his spine, the same feeling he remembered from his worst days. The purple whirlpool in his hand twisted into a shape he knew too well, a hungry well that dragged in everything around it. Yanshin's mind snapped to the truth. This was the demon well absorption arts, the very method he had used as the black flame demonic sovereign. For a heartbeat, the darkness in his chest gave way to a soft, distant image, like a memory of a peaceful day trying to pull him back from the edge. Purple embers once rained around him like a twisted snowfall, gathering into a blazing mass that answered only to his will. In that memory, the man who would become the black flame demonic sovereign stood beneath it, lips set in a hard line as if this ruin was nothing. One of the sect's disciples knelt on the broken floor, body covered in wounds as he glared up through the pain, asking why this was happening and what they had done to deserve it. Bodies of his fellow disciples lay scattered across the courtyard, purple flames eating at what was left of them, while a lone dark figure stood over the last survivor. The kneeling man screamed, demanding to know why they were being torn apart like this. The dark-robed figure looked down without a hint of pity, purple light swirling in his hand as he gathered power. He named the coming strike blossom-splitting blade, treating the disciples' desperate words as nothing more than a last breath before the disciple's body shook as he forced himself upright, bloodied hand reaching toward the figure looming over him. With barely any breath left, he tried to speak of his sect one last time, as if clinging to its name could still mean something. The disciple cried out for his sect leader, but the answer was only a giant shadow swallowing the courtyard. Purple fire and broken bodies covered the floor as that dragon-shaped darkness coiled over everything like the hand of a god. Above the sect, a dragon of pure darkness rose toward a swirling purple maw in the sky. He looked up at his own work and coolly decided that the blossom-splitting blade was decent at best. Kneeling on the cracked tiles, the dark-robed man stared at the blood around him and felt almost nothing. The massacre had stirred a bit of shallow joy, but it was nowhere close to filling the empty hole inside him. As the monster from his past smiled and ordered the broken disciple to look up, the boy in the present felt fire explode from his chest. Yanshin's goo flame wheel arts roared to life, racing down his arm as if trying to burn away the darkness clawing at him. Yanshin's eyes widened as he felt the power twist inside him in a way he had never known. Fear crawled up his spine. This was not how the goo clan flames were supposed to act. Inside him, the flame wheel spun into a blazing ring, wrapping around the lump of purple power. Instead of just burning it clean, the fire swallowed the demonic energy whole, something that had never once happened in his past life. Two of the escorts leaned over him, faces tight with panic as they called out to the young master. From their eyes alone, it was clear that whatever he had just done scared them more than the monsters had. In the middle of the dark road, Yanshin sat propped up while a young girl in white fussed over him and checked his pulse. The guards circled them with tense faces, and when he finally muttered that he was fine, the tight air around the group loosened just a little. Yanshin forced his face to stay calm, while Xiao Ah stared at him in shock. And he decided to hide the truth about swallowing demonic energy, knowing nothing good would come from anyone finding out. Xiao Ah grabbed the young master's cheeks and leaned in, saying he looked really hurt, while Yanshin tried to act like it was nothing serious. When Xiao Ah nervously added that his face looked really bad, Yanshin's temper flared, more from hurt pride than actual pain. One of the escorts scolded Xiao Ah for pestering the young master. And while Xiao Ah flailed around claiming she was only worried, the woman gently said they could stop by a nearby apothecary if Yanshin still felt unwell. Later, Yanshin told the escort leader that it was not that bad and that a good night's sleep would fix it, then asked everyone to get ready for the journey again, so the man agreed to follow his lead. While the escorts packed up the wagon and talked about taking only the useful parts of the monster, Yanshin walked under the night sky, teasing Xiao Ah in his head about drooling in her sleep and quietly checking himself. He realized he could no longer feel any demonic energy inside. And when he looked at the now pale demonic stone, he understood that the goo flame wheel arts had truly swallowed its power. Yanshin crushed the drained demonic stone into dust in his fist, hiding any trace of what happened, and telling himself it was time to keep moving.